Tonight's story is one of my favorites. It's called The Polar Express. And this was given to our family in 1988. It's 29 years old. It's crazy. All right, let's get started. On Christmas Eve, many years ago, I lay quietly in my bed. I did not rustle the sheets. I breathed slowly and silently. I was listening for a sound my friend told me he never heard. The sound of ringing bells of Santa's sleigh. There is no Santa, my friend had insisted, but I knew he was wrong. Late that night, I did hear sounds, though not of ringing bells. From outside came the sound of a hissing steam and squeaking metal. I looked through my window and saw a train standing perfectly still in front of my house. It was wrapped in an apron of steam. Snowflakes fell lightly around it. A conductor stood at the open door of one of the cars. He took out a large pocket watch from his vest, then looked up at my window. I put on my slippers and robe. I tiptoed downstairs and out the door. "All aboard!" the conductor cried out. I ran up to him. "Well," he said, "are you coming?" "Where?" I said. "Why, to the North Pole, of course," was his answer. "This is the Polar Express." I took his outstretched hand and he pulled me aboard. Oh, the hot chocolate. Sounds so good. The train was filled with other children, all in their pajamas and nightgowns. We sang Christmas carols and ate candies and nougat centers as white as snow. We drank hot cocoa as thick and rich as melted chocolate bars. Outside, the lights of towns and villages flickered in the distances as the Polar Express raced northward. Soon there were more lights to be seen. We traveled through cold, dark forests where lean wolves roamed and white-tailed rabbits hid from our train as it thundered through the quiet wilderness. We climbed mountains so high it seemed we would scrape the moon, but the Polar Express never slowed down. Faster and faster we rang along, rolling over peaks and through valleys like a car on a roller coaster. The mountains turned into hills, the snow-covered plains. We crossed a barren desert of ice, the great polar ice caps. Lights appeared in the distance. They looked like the lights of a strange ocean liner sailing across a frozen sea. "There," said the conductor, "is the North Pole." The North Pole. It was a huge city, standing alone on the top of the world, filled with factories of every kind where Christmas toys were made. At first, we saw no elves. "They're gathering at the center of the city," the conductor told us. "That is where Santa will give the first gift of Christmas." "Who receives the first gift?" we all asked. The conductor answered, "He will choose one of you." "Look!" shouted one of the children. "The elves!" Outside we saw hundreds of elves. As our train drew closer to the center of the North Pole, we slowed to a crawl. So crowded the streets with Santa's helpers. When the Polar Express, it's not a bear, it's a train. When the Polar Express could not go any further, we stopped and the conductor let us outside. We pressed through the crowd at the edge of a large open circle. In front of us stood Santa's sleigh. The reindeer were excited. They pranced and paced, ringing the silver sleigh bells that hung from their harness. It was a magical sound like nothing I had ever heard. Across the circle, the elves moved apart and Santa Claus appeared. The elves cheered wildly. He marched over to us and, pointing to me, said, "Let's have this fellow here." He jumped into his sleigh. The conductor handed me up. I sat on Santa's knee and he asked, "Now, what would you like for Christmas?" I knew that I could have any gift I could imagine, but the thing I wanted most for Christmas was not inside Santa's big bag. What I wanted more than anything was one of the silver bells from Santa's sleigh. When I asked, Santa smiled. Then he gave me a hug and told an elf to cut a bell from the reindeer's harness. The elf tossed it up to Santa. He stood holding the bell high above him and called out, "The first gift of Christmas!" Ding, 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 ding. A clock struck midnight as the elves roared their approval. Santa handed the bell to me, and I put it in my pocket. Santa shouted out the reindeers' names and cracked his whip. His team charged forward and climbed into the air. Santa circled once, then twice above us, then disappeared into the cold, dark polar sky. As soon as we were back inside the Polar Express, the other children asked to see the bell. I reached into my pocket, and I felt that I had a hole. I had lost the silver bell from Santa Claus's sleigh. "Let's hurry outside and look for it," one of the children said. But the train gave a sudden lurch and started moving. We were on our way home. It broke my heart to lose the bell. When the train reached my house, I sadly left the other children. I stood at my doorway and waved goodbye. The conductor said something to me as the train was moving away, but I couldn't hear him. "What?" I yelled out. He cupped his hands around his mouth and said, "Merry Christmas!" he shouted. The Polar Express let out a loud blast from its whistle and sped away. On Christmas morning, my little sister Sarah and I opened our presents. When it looked as if everything had been unwrapped, Sarah found one last small box behind the tree. It had my name on it. There was a note. "Found this on the seat of my sleigh. Fix the hole in your pocket. Signed, Mr. C." I shook the bell. It made the most beautiful sound my sister and I had ever heard. But my mother said, "Oh, that's too bad." "Yes," said my father, "it's broken." When I'd shaken the bell, my parents had not heard a sound. Can you hear it? I can. At one time, most of my friends could hear the bell, but as years passed, it fell silent for all of them. Even Sarah found one Christmas that she could no longer hear its sweet sound. Though I've grown old, the bell rings for me as it does for all those who truly believe.